No matter how many times scientists warned humanity about climate change, nobody listened. And by 2019, a series of hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, and droughts caused destruction all over the planet. After losing several cities, world leaders came together led by the U.S., and they found a way to neutralize the storms with a net of thousands of satellites, each deploying countermeasures designed to impact the basic elements of weather. This net of satellites was known as Dutch Boy and was designed by Chief Architect Jake. For now, it was a U.S.-owned operation, but in 3 years the Dutch Boy would be transferred to an international council. One day, Jake is called to a disciplinary hearing with the U.S. Senate subcommittee because he punched a federal inspector and brought Dutch Boy online without authorization. Jake doesn't accept the scolding and meets their words with sass, ignoring the text from his brother Max asking him to stop. Jake explains he punched the officer because he wouldn't stop touching machine parts that almost killed him, and that he activated the Dutch Boy to stop a series of storms that would have killed thousands of people. The Senate doesn't care. They just want Jake to be obedient, so they decide they'll send new staff to the station to keep an eye on things, and that Jake will have to fire some of the old team members. After the meeting is over, Jake bumps into Max, who works under the U.S. Secretary of State. Max has been chosen to be in charge of Dutch Boy, and he's decided to fire Jake because he thinks that's the best thing for the project. Jake is devastated to learn his brother can do this to his family and doesn't speak to him again. 3 years later, a UN team stationed in Afghanistan gets some weird readings on their scanners and goes to check a village nearby. To their shock, the entire place is frozen and the people are dead. A recording of this finding is sent to U.S. President Palma and his team, agreeing it must be kept secret for now. There's evidence this was caused by Dutch Boy, but the politicians don't want to shut it down because the press will immediately jump on it to find the cause. Max proposes to send someone to check on the dysfunction, and Secretary of State DECOM tells him to hire Jake for the job because no matter how much Max dislikes his brother, Jake is still the one that knows the station the best. Meanwhile, in the Dutch Boy, the satellite responsible for Afghanistan comes back to be checked on. Engineer Habib finds some strange date in its hard drive and decides to make a copy that he hides in his locker. Afterwards, he tries to go back to work, but when he steps into an empty room, suddenly the doors lock themselves around him and the windows break. Habib is expelled into space and dies instantly. The next day, Max visits Jake, who is living in Florida after his divorce, and gets his daughter, Hannah, 2 weekends a month. Jake doesn't want to see Max and tries to send him away. But Max tells him about Afghanistan and the airlock accident, asking him to rejoin the project. When Jake turns him down, Max changes his mind by pointing out that his invention is killing people. Later, in the Hong Kong offices of the Pacific Climate Council, Long logs in the system and notices something weird about the incident in Afghanistan. So he tries to call Max to warn him, only to be met by voicemail. Afterwards, he goes to the market to get some groceries, noticing how hot it is. In fact, the heat is so bad that a cat is trying to stay inside the market fridge. And when Long accidentally drops his eggs, they fry on the pavement. Suddenly, the ground starts shaking and Long notices fire whirls destroying the streets. He immediately escapes in his car, driving around all the panicking people and the constant crumbling of the buildings. Long doesn't stop until he reaches the road outside the city, and the temperature lowering indicates he's out of reach. But when he turns around, he discovers Hong Kong is now in ruins. When it's time for Jake to leave, Hannah cries because she thinks Jake won't return, and he's always been hard to rely on. But Jake promises he'll be back. Moments later, Jake is boarding a shuttle and flying to the Dutch Boy, feeling at home again in space. He meets Commander Fassbender, the chief scientist of the station, and she introduces him to her main team, which includes Security Officer Doucette and System Analyst Duncan. They think the incident in Hong Kong was a gas explosion because that's what the news said. But Jake is sure it was caused by the same thing that froze the village. Meanwhile on Earth, Max is spending time with his girlfriend Sarah, who is part of the President's Secret Service. They're interrupted by a call from Long, who informs Max of the heat he felt before the incident happened, meaning it wasn't a gas pipe. He's trying to check on the Dutch Boy to confirm his theory, but his account has been blocked and Max discovers so has his. Someone in the government is covering up a system defect, and this has the potential to cause a geostorm, which consists of simultaneous catastrophic weather events triggered all over the globe. Max promises to look into it, and after hanging up, he learns Sarah has been called to work because the president has decided to do a last-minute press briefing, which sounds rather sudden. At the office, Long continues to try to log in when the power goes out. He hears some voices coming from the corridor and rushes to hide. This allows Long to watch how U.S. agents take away his computer and all his paperwork. In The Dutch Boy, Jake learns that the Afghanistan logs were wiped clean by the malfunction, so he orders the team to check the logs of the other satellites to track any signs of corruption. The next day, Max visits his friend Dana, a cybersecurity expert that works for the government department. He asks her to look into the blocking of the accounts, and Dana confirms someone programmed this to make it look as if it was part of a glitch, but it was definitely intentional. In The Dutch Boy, Jake has a video meeting with Max, who informs him that there may be some foul play involved in the incidents. Jake is glad to hear this because he knew the Dutch Boy had been built well, and Max authorizes him to retrieve the Hong Kong satellite. This causes an argument because Jake doesn't think he needs Max's permission to do anything. And Max reminds him that he had to clean up after Jake's dumb mistakes all the time after their parents died. He's tired of being responsible for his brother, so if Jake doesn't behave, he'll be fired again. The Hong Kong satellite arrives at the station, but suddenly the robot arm that grabs it goes crazy and begins shaking around, damaging part of the hangar before dropping the satellite. The fall absolutely destroys the satellite, and the team has to salvage the few parts that survived. Unfortunately, the accident created an electrical short and fried all the drives, so Jake thinks they don't have any proof of corruption to analyze. However, Dissette informs him he's been looking at the video of Habib's death, and he's discovered something. The panels that exploded had drives in them, and one of them got stuck in the communication tower. Jake and Fassbender go on a spacewalk to retrieve the panel, but out of a sudden Jake's suit begins functioning, and he loses control of his movements. The shaking causes him to drop the panel and get hit against the station, so he ejects his jetpack and manages to hold onto a wire to avoid floating away. Moments later, Fassbender brings him back inside and Jake reveals he took the drive from the panel before he let go of it. When the team checks on them, Jake doesn't tell them about the drive because he's sure his suit was sabotaged by one of them. Afterward, he and Fassbender investigate the drive and discover there are no signs of corruption, which confirms someone has been causing the so-called accidents on purpose. Jake tries to find the login information behind this programming, but he's locked out. In the meantime, Long arrives in D.C. and agrees to meet with Max and Sarah at a cafe. However, when Long is about to cross the street, he's pushed in front of a car and hit badly. The mysterious man escapes in his own car, and Sarah tries to go after him, but she isn't fast enough. Max runs to Long's side and hears him say the words hiss before he dies. A few hours later, Max gets a call from Jake, and takes it because he says it's an emergency. However, Jake only wants to apologize for his behavior, and reminds Max there's an unspoken code between brothers before telling the whole story of the day they went fishing with their dad. Max catches on to his intentions and rushes to see Dana to show her a recording of Jake's anecdote. Dana doesn't understand how it's an emergency, and Max explains they never went fishing as kids, meaning Jake is trying to pass a message in code because he thinks he's being spied on. Max gives Dana the code they used as kids, and Dana puts together different minutes from the video to create the real message. Proof of sabotage at the highest level of government. Trust no one. Next, Max asks Dana to look into Project Zeus, and Dana finds a file that is double encrypted in a White House security network, which isn't hackable. She needs the right credentials to break it. Moments later, Sarah returns home and sees signs someone has broken in. She takes out her gun only to discover it's Max and Dana, who don't want anyone to know they're there. Max asks Sarah for her credentials to steal the information, and at first Sarah refuses because it would be breaking her oath. But she changes her mind when Max points out that if he's asking for something so serious, it's because it's extremely important. Back to the Dutch Boy, Jake and Fassbender check the security cameras and discover Habib hid something in his locker. However, when they check it out, they find the locker empty. Suddenly, Dissette appears pointing his gun at them. And since he doesn't immediately kill them, Jake understands Dissette wants to find out who killed Habib too. After confirming they're all on the same side, Dissette confesses Habib's things are in a different locker. He explains he saw the security cameras too, and said nothing because he thought the criminal would reveal themselves by coming to destroy the items. The trio opens the right locker and finds the copy of the drive, which reveals someone has put a virus in the station system. Meanwhile, Sarah gives Dana her login information, allowing her to find the files on Project Zeus. She finds a series of simulations that end with geostorms, and Max realizes someone used those simulations to make the storms happen for real. Afterwards, Max has a video call with Jake to inform him someone is weaponizing the Dutch boy to attack specific cities, and Jake confirms they're doing it through the virus. He wants to shut down the Dutch boy temporarily. That way, a reboot can flush out the virus. Max authorizes it, but there's a slight problem. The only one that has the kill codes is the president, and Jake doesn't trust Palma. Only someone with power can block their accounts, and it's no coincidence that in 3 weeks the US must hand control of Dutch boy to the International Council. Max asks Jake to keep an eye on the satellites while he finds a way to obtain the kill codes. A few hours later, President Palma is heading to Orlando for a national convention. Max approaches Sarah in secret and convinces her the conspiracy is real, so she must help him steal the codes. To get on the plane too, Max tells his bosses he's going to see his dad who lives in Florida. At that moment, the Dutch boy receives warning messages indicating 200 satellites are functioning, most of them nearing critical. The consequences are soon seen on Earth.